This is correct.
And how much do you charge per speech?
So we bear the brunt of the infrastructure necessary to make all of that happen, but we're not sharing the way other states share, and it's one of the reasons I thank the members of this committee while you were out for the ones who co-sponsored the RISE Act, because it is incredibly important for a state like Louisiana, and we constitutionally dedicate every dollar we get, as you know, to the coast.
The Murphy family of Murphy Oil and the Deming family of Murphy Oil have recently given Tulane $25 million. Have you called on Tulane to give that money back?
It's their prerogative, not mine.
Okay. But yet you just signed a letter saying that all elite universities should refuse fossil fuel money. Did you put a footnote in there and say, except my own?
The ongoing debate between environmental responsibility and economic necessity is playing out sharply in energy-producing states like Louisiana. Recently, a Senate hearing brought this conflict into focus, highlighting tensions between national climate goals and the local realities of fossil fuel-dependent communities. At the center of the discussion was Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana, who questioned Professor Jesse Keenan from Tulane University. Professor Keenan, an expert on climate policy, had joined other academics in signing a letter urging elite universities to stop accepting funding from fossil fuel companies. Senator Kennedy, however, pointed out that Tulane itself had recently accepted $25 million from families tied to Murphy Oil.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Governor. Professor Keenan, you teach at Tulane?
Yes, sir, I do. I have that privilege.
And you have your own website, KeenanClimate.com, is that right?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And you describe yourself on your website as a globally recognized thought leader. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you give paid speeches, do you?
On occasion, I do.
You have your own agent, I believe, according to your website, Lee Bureau.
This is correct.
And how much do you charge per speech?
It varies depending on the audience, the amount of preparation work that goes, and the amount of follow-through.
The last paid speech you gave, how much did you receive?
I'm happy to follow up on.
You don't remember?
I do not.
Do you give that money to Tulane?
I do not.
You keep it?
Yes, this is outside of my capacity as a professor.
Right.
As is standard course.
Now, you recently sent a letter you recently joined a lot of other academics. You signed a letter demanding that elite institutions and universities stop accepting money from fossil fuel companies. Is that correct?
This is correct.
You consider Tulane an elite university?
I would like to think that we have a high standard of excellence in our education and our research.
Okay. Well, the Murphy family of Murphy Oil and the Deming family of Murphy Oil have recently given Tulane $25 million. Have you called on Tulane to give that money back?
Well, it's not, they didn't give that money to my unit or the department or school that I work in.
Have you called on Tulane to give that money back, or you think that's okay for them to keep it?
It's their prerogative, not mine.
Okay. Yet you just signed a letter saying that all elite universities should refuse fossil fuel money. Did you put a footnote in there and say, except my own?
Well, what I'd like to say, Senator, is that I believe it raises a conflict of interest for those that research climate change that are supported by the fossil fuel industry.
Yeah, but then why don't you ask Tulane to give the $25 million back?
Well, I think in the context, if that money were to be used to support climate research, information, disinformation, or whatever it may be, then that may be an appropriate conflict of interest. But I think in the context of which
you don't see the hypocrisy here?
It is hypocrisy in those that may read and interpret it as such.
Maybe it's like Washington. If there weren't double standards, there wouldn't be standards at all. Let me ask you this. You also participated in another article here criticizing Houston for building new buildings and McMansions. And you said, I'm going to read your quote. I don't want to misquote you, Professor. That means we have to change our consumer preferences. You could have a super efficient, energy efficient mega mansion in Houston or the suburbs, but it's still a mansion. You're still over consuming space. Did you say that?
Yes, sir. That's based on work as a member of the IPCC. Our research suggested that reducing our footprint in terms of total spatial footprint would have significant impacts on the decarbonization of the built environment.
And so you're saying that people should live in smaller houses because larger houses contribute to CO2 emissions?
100%, Senator.
Okay. Well, recently, Tulane finished the Commons. It was 77,000 square feet, $55 million. Recently, Tulane finished the Gold Ring Woldenberg Business Complex, $35 million to complete, 92,000 square feet. Boy, that's a McMansion. Mustapher Hall, 23,000 square feet. Paul Hall, 36,000 square feet. Richardson Hall, 50,000 square feet. Housing redevelopment phase 1, 230,000 square feet at Tulane. Have you called upon Tulane to stop these buildings?
Sir, the habitable space within those units are roughly the size of the conference room back there and are indeed quite small.
But they contribute to, does
everything that we do, sir.
The Commons contribute more to climate change than a McMansion in Houston? You were pretty quick to criticize the people of Houston for wanting to build, you thought, McMansions. But you don't criticize your own university?
I don't find that to be equivocal comparison between space meant for students who must reside at a university.
You don't see the hypocrisy in that?
It is your finding and interpretation, sir.
But you don't see the irony of the hypocrisy?
I'm going to go ahead and say no.
Okay. I kind of gathered that would be your answer. Governor, good to see you. You live in a big house, don't you?
Currently, I do, yes.
How big is the governor's mansion?
I don't know the square footage, but it's large, and it's 60 years old this year. You ought to come by and
I
see
need to get
the
by.
work.
Well, the professor from Tulane doesn't like that. Let me ask you, do you think it's fair? Look, John Bell, we get 37.5% of offshore oil royalties under Go Mesa. New Mexico gets 50%. Share from the federal government, for God's sakes. Wyoming gets 50%. North Dakota gets 50%. We get 37.5%, and we got to share it with 4 other states.
Raising what he saw as contradictions in Keenan's position. The senator also pressed Keenan on his criticism of suburban McMansions for contributing to climate change, contrasting that stance with Tulane's large-scale campus construction projects. To Kennedy, this represented a clear example of hypocrisy, calling out others while excusing actions closer to home. The hearing then shifted to a critical financial issue for Louisiana, the unfairness of federal revenue sharing from offshore oil and gas production. While states like New Mexico and North Dakota receive 50% of their fossil fuel royalties, Louisiana gets only 37.5%, and has to split that with other Gulf states. Louisiana argues that since it bears the burden of supporting the energy infrastructure, it deserves a fairer share. This is why the state is pushing for the RISA Act, which would increase Louisiana's share of royalties and include new offshore wind revenue as well. With the expiration of BP oil spill settlement funds approaching, Louisiana leaders argue that this funding is essential, not just for economic reasons, but to continue the vital work of protecting and restoring its vulnerable coastline. This hearing highlighted the larger challenge America faces, balancing climate action with fairness to states whose economies are still closely tied to energy production.
And it's capped at $375 million that we get to share no matter.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, that just sucks.
I don't think it's fair, and 90% of all Gulf oil and gas exploration production activities are served out of Port Fourchon. So we bear the brunt of the infrastructure necessary to make all of that happen, but we're not sharing the way other states share, and it's one of the reasons I thank the members of this committee while you were out for the ones who co-sponsored the RISE Act, because it is incredibly important for a state like Louisiana, and we constitutionally dedicate every dollar we get, as you know, to the coast.
All we're asking is to be treated like everybody else, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
And we have a solution, don't we?
We do.
And it's called the RISE Act. Tell us about the RISE Act.
Well, it's a wonderful piece of legislation that we are obviously hoping that you pass, not only for the benefits that you just mentioned, but currently there's no revenue sharing mechanism in place in federal law with respect to wind. We'll have the first offshore wind lease sale next month. And so this is a very real thing for us, especially as we look at the loss of the BP Horizon fines that have been paid. In fact, the Mid-Barataria, $2.9 billion paid for with BP dollars. But those go away in 2031. We really need to replace that revenue, and wind energy gives us an opportunity, but we need that structure in place, and I appreciate your work on that.
Well, to be blunt, we've proven we can use the money well, and we've put our own money up, and it is patently unfair that other states get a larger share, much larger share than Louisiana. And I think the RISE Act, which will also help our wind industry, as Senator Whitehouse knows, we're working together on, is long overdue. And I appreciate you coming up here to talk about that bill. I was in the judiciary, that's why I was late. And the chairman's been very generous with allowing me to go over. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Not a problem, Senator Kennedy. Glad to have you here with your governor present. And I would note that your colleague, Senator Cassidy, is also an extremely energetic and lively proponent of the RISE bill, and we continue to work together, Governor, with your delegation to try to make sure that we can get this bill passed through ENR with the support of your former gubernatorial colleague, now Senator Manchin, and we're continuing to make progress. With that, let me say that the questions for the record that need to be filed must be in by noon tomorrow. And if the witnesses would be kind enough to respond to any questions for the record you may receive within